everyone. Welcome to Know Your Rights with me, Ambika Hiranandani. I'm bringing you this series in collaboration with my friends at Schbang for Good. The purpose of this series is to explain to all of us what our legal rights are in various situations. So whether it's an animal being beaten up or a neighbor who's being harassed, or if we're facing a challenging situation, the purpose of this series is to really tell us what are your laws, what are your rights, who are the authorities to call. Today, we're going to be dealing with a topic which is extremely close to my heart, which is protecting the environment. The truth is, we're totally reliant on the environment for our survival. Protecting the environment is often viewed as something that's altruistic, but it's not really. It's something that we're doing to protect the human race and to ensure that we leave a world that's as beautiful, if not more beautiful, for the generations to come. We have a very special guest today who is my friend Stalin. Stalin and I met maybe 12, 13 years ago when we were working on the mangroves of Mumbai. I had just graduated with my law degree and I used to come and ask Stalin all sorts of questions. Stalin, how do I do this? Stalin, how do I file that in court? Stalin, explain this to me. And Stalin would always sit back, take time out and explain these important aspects of activism to me. So Stalin, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Stalin, you're the director of Anashakti. You've been associated with many NGOs. You've worked with a lot of young people. Can you tell us how the average person can have their voice heard for the environment? Because the truth is, what you're doing is, you've sort of decided that activism is your thing. But for a lot of people, everyone's got like a day job. Everyone has things that they want to do in their life, but they still care about the environment. So could you tell us a little bit about how we can all do our bit for the environment?
It starts basically with a connect with the nature. And when you talk of nature, I'm not asking you to go and connect with the forests of Kaziranga or the Western Ghats. You start connecting with your local biodiversity. We should remember that we don't live in isolation from the animals and birds around us or the trees around us. So if we can even establish a connect with those, then automatically you become a soldier for Mother Earth. So I would say that's the starting point. You understand that because everyone at heart has some love for nature because we are all, after all, nature's children. So I would say the starting point is to connect with the local biodiversity and try and protect it at that level. Whatever is remaining, it may be a simple sparrow's nest in your house or in your terrace or in your balcony. Maybe you can protect that and let the birds be there. So you're doing your part. You don't have to come out and take part in morchas or file cases or go on screaming on rooftops. You can do your little bit. That's what.
So I think that totally leads into my next question. So what I'm going to do with you, Stalin, is I'm going to ask you 5, 6 different scenarios that I have dealt with in the past few years and that a lot of my friends have dealt with. And I'm going to ask you what we can do in those situations. So the first situation is, what if I see untreated effluents being discharged into a river? What should I do at that point of time?
So when you see untreated effluents or even effluents which are not allowed to be discharged into first of all, you cannot discharge any effluent into a drinking water zone. It may be treated or untreated. That's an entirely different story. But like you said, if it's untreated, then the Water Act, it's a violation of the Water Prevention of Pollution Act. And then you need to complain to the regional officer of that Maharashtra Pollution Control Board or the State Pollution Control Board. Simultaneously, you can file a complaint with the collector of that district. Both these authorities are empowered to take action. So when they come down, you show them the violation and an FIR is registered and the case proceeds against the violators. That's how it happens. But it's important that you keep the Environment Department of the state involved in this entire process. You can also loop in the Principal Secretary of the Environment Department into your communications with the government. So what happens is you have communicated to all concerned and that is good enough for a start.
So brilliant. If I'm there, if there's a river that's close to my house, if I go and visit a river, I see effluents going into it, I see the river looking kind of, muddy or dirty after that, and I'm concerned about this, first thing I need to do is shoot off a letter to my pollution control board, to the local collector of the region, and keep the environment department of the state government in the loop as well. So perhaps CC them in the communication and share this out. Because at least then you're making the department alert that, hey, there could be a violation here. Right. So now the second situation, which is something that you've dealt with a whole lot. What if tomorrow I wake up and I see someone cutting a tree outside my house, or I see that, my road which has 6, 7, 8 beautiful trees and I see them being systematically cut. What do I then do and who do I call?
First of all, the Tree Act, the Tree Act is meant to protect the trees. There is a tree officer in every municipal ward of the city. So you need to immediately inform the tree officer or the ward officer of that your particular municipal ward, and also the garden superintendent. And again, like I said, keep the environment secretary in the loop whenever you are communicating. Now, the issue here in Mumbai, especially when you see, is that people are witnessing rampant chopping of the trees and very unscientific trimming. That is because most of the trees are standing in very little soil. They are very vulnerable to falling and killing people or hurting people or damaging property. So the corporation, instead of reinforcing the tree basins and allowing the tree more soil so that the roots can grip themselves, they have just gone on chopping and reducing the load on the trees. So it's, and what happens is, unfortunately, a couple of people died or more people have died because of tree falls. And then the High Court, in its wisdom as a precautionary measure, has said that wherever a tree is in danger of falling on people, you can do what you want with it. So that is the issue. So it again all depends on what position the tree is in. But if you really know that the tree could fall, then you should invest heavily in trying to save it. But if trimming it saves the lives of people and keeps the tree alive, maybe then that's a call you will have to take without getting your emotion involved into it. You have to be very practical about that call at that point of time.
So basically, if I see a tree outside my house and I see the municipal authorities cutting it, and I'm worried that the municipal authorities are going to go for the next tree and the next tree, the first thing you think I should do is write to the tree department, perhaps of my
No,
municipal.
no. First of all, you can stop the person who's cutting the tree, ask him to show the documents which allow him to cut the tree, because a permission is never a blanket permission to cut a tree. There will be the specification of the tree, the location of the tree, the number of branches that are supposed to be cut, the width of the branch, all these things are mentioned, and that you have the power to ask him. If they are not refusing to, if they refuse to show it to you, you dial 100, call the local police station and say that I am a concerned citizen. I want to know what is this permissions. He is not showing it to me, please help me see the permissions, and then you can see it. And if you can analyze and find out that he's violating those permissions, then you can tell the police to take action, and they will immediately stop the work. And then they call the tree officer and ask him to register an offense against the concerned persons who are cutting the trees.
Have you seen instances like this in Mumbai where somebody's noticed that a tree is being cut, they picked up the phone, they've called the police, and they've actually managed to save the tree?
Yes, yes. In fact, a lot of residents have done that. In fact, I have done it in my area. I've managed to save a lot of trees. So now we know that it's not that you can just go and chop away any tree. Mercifully, you have a good environment minister who's sensitive towards trees again. But this we need more scientific trimming of trees and management of trees. So it starts with calling the cops and getting that permissions checked, and then you go and file a complaint if you still are aggrieved on it.
Right. So there are three steps. If I see someone cutting a tree, I walk up to them saying, please show me your permission, look at the permission, study it. If I find a violation, I call the police. If I'm still aggrieved at this particular point of time, I can write to the tree authority of the local corporation. So just by doing this, this is like a way that people like me can actually get out and save the trees in our areas, in our colonies, and on our streets, because they're so, particularly in a city like Mumbai, it's so important. They add so much beauty to the city and they keep our city cool. So the case for trees is extremely strong. Now I'm going to ask you a question about the case, which is the reason that we met and started working together. What if I see illegal dumping on mangroves? I know that all dumping on mangroves is illegal, but what if I see somebody, with the JCBs, which we so often see in Navi Mumbai, dumping on mangroves? What should I do? Who should I call? How do I stop this?
See, mangroves are protected under the CRZ notification and by virtue of being declared as protected forest by the orders of the Honorable High Court. So what happens here is you have to identify which is the agency responsible for the protection. If it is in the custody of the forest department, if it's a notified forest, then the forest department is the person you need to complain to. If it happens to be on revenue land, then the collector, the MPCB, the MCZMA, and the environment department are the people who can come into it. So you have to first understand it. But if you're unsure, it is always the best thing to do is to call up the local revenue department or Tahsildar and the collector and file a complaint with them. But in Maharashtra, you have a dedicated mangrove protection cell, the mangrove cell of the forest department, who are dedicated towards protecting mangroves. They have been proactive, and if needed, they do visit non-forest areas which are not under their custody or not notified, and still they write out reports and send it to the collector saying that these are your lands and mangroves are there and you need to protect it. So your best bet today is the mangrove cell, the forest department. Okay, but it always, the collector has the power over everything. So your collector is responsible for all the mangroves. and the High Court will always take cognizance of any violation of its order. So you have multiple layers of protection, and also write to the Maharashtra Coastal Zone Management Authority, the Environment Department, because these are all coastal forests which come under the CRZ notification. The Indian Forest Act, then even the Indian Wildlife Protection Act will also come in if it is a wildlife habitat. If you see flamingos or protected species in that area, it will automatically attract the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act also.
So you're basically saying the first thing, writing to the collector is a safe bet. Writing to the tehsildar, there is a mangrove cell specifically deputed for the protection of the mangroves. We should get in touch with them, and we can also get in touch with the coastal zone management authorities. So we need to write to them, and then see, for example, in all these cases, whether it's in the case of effluent discharge, whether it's in the case of dumping of mangroves. Now, in the case of effluent discharge, I wrote to the pollution control board. In the case of dumping on mangroves, I've written to the collector, I've written to the mangrove cell. If there's no action in these cases and I'm constantly seeing habitats around me being destroyed, what should I do?
If it's once after filing a complaint, let's see, there are two ways to approaching this. Either you take on the battle yourself, or if you feel that you don't have that much resources, bandwidth, money, whatever, then it makes sense for you to approach some local NGO which is working in that field. But if you have the power for it, then what I always tell people is that after you file a complaint, within a month's time, you send an RTI asking them what was the action taken on your complaints. That generally kickstarts all the action from the government side, because then they know the person who's filed the complaint is tracking it. So then some action will happen. But as of today, you are happy. There is also a phone number. I'm not sure which number it is. Whether it's 1918. There's a helpline number which is devoted for such complaints for mangroves and destruction of wetlands. You can just dial that number. It's a toll-free number. And also there is a wetland website also where you can file an online complaint. Your name also doesn't have to be disclosed. So there are multiple ways you can handle this. And like I said, there are organizations like Manashakti which will help you if the local administration doesn't respond to your complaints. And there is a wetland grievance redressal committee. There's a mangrove protection committee, both in the state of Maharashtra. And fortunately, by God's grace, I am a member of both the committees. So I do follow up on citizens' complaints.
So great. So we've understood exactly what we need to do, and if our complaint isn't being taken seriously, people aren't acting on it, then we wait 30 days. We can perhaps file an RTI. If the RTI doesn't work, then we can always pick up the phone and call activists, call our local environmental, the people who care for the environment, who understand the regulations, and seek their assistance. So I get that there are both these options available, and to be honest, I think filing an RTI is an extremely simple procedure. We can even do it online. It takes about 5 minutes, and we're actually holding the authorities accountable, saying, hey, you've got to do something about this. So for those of us in Mumbai, in Navi Mumbai, we're lucky. There are so many of us who care. So we have a community. But I'm just saying, for people who are in, for sort of areas that are far, that are very far away from the cities, they kind of have sometimes more of a challenge dealing with departments. So there's always the option of filing an RTI and making sure our officers are accountable. So Stalin, can you tell us a little bit about, like people like you and me, we travel across the length and breadth of India, and we often see factories which are polluting the environment around them. Like I've seen factories with pools all around the factory, and I know for a fact that effluents are going in. I know this water is going into the groundwater. I know this is causing a lot of pollution, and the people who live around these factories are often very poor people who can't raise their voice. So it's exploitation of vulnerability at every level. So can you tell me what a concerned citizen can do if they see a factory like this?
First of all, the main body to address water pollution is the Maharashtra Pollution Control Board or the State Pollution Control Board, wherever this may be. Then comes the Central Pollution Control Board, which is this overriding body, which is the supreme body, and the collector again, for example. These three people need to be, you should lodge complaints with these three people, and also keep the environment department in the loop. And what every citizen must do is to download two apps on their phone. One is called the GPS map camera app, wherein the the location, the time, and everything comes onto the is put onto the photograph. So nobody can dispute that this photograph is not of a particular date or not from a particular location. The second app is the video stamper app, which has the same qualities. On a video on the bottom right side, you will find that the lat long and the timing is mentioned on it. So you have evidence which cannot be disputed. So if you use simple technology, you can prove that there was a violation, and then you can file the complaint and then follow up, seek what were the permissions given to this factory, what are they manufacturing, and what is the safeguard which they were supposed to indulge in, and then we have to take it forward from there. Like I said again, after 1 month, you file an RTA and ask them what action was taken, or even immediately when you file a complaint, the regional officer or the sub-regional officer is supposed to visit the site and call you also and show you, and you are supposed to show that person what's wrong with it, and then he will give you an explanation, which is, if you're satisfied with the explanation, fine. If you're not, you say no, I'm not satisfied, I want this complaint investigated, and you follow up with the higher ups like the member secretary of the board or the seniors in their departments. So we can do it, but the point is, your starting point is to keep all the complaints on record. That's very important.
So, what I've noticed often is that, we see a violation of the environment taking place. We feel really bad about it. But I often encourage people, exactly what you're saying is that if you get out there and you put a complaint, you write a complaint, you share this on your social media, you tell your friends about it, you tell your family about it, you file an RTI after that. Oftentimes, just doing that, just being a little active at that point of time is sufficient to kind of get things going and create awareness, and for somebody like you to then hear about it, read about it on social media, find out about this complaint, hear about it in the papers, and then go in and take action. So kind of the first thing that we really need to do is, because the trees can't speak, the fish in the water can't speak, the flamingos can't speak, so first thing we need to do is kick up a storm and say, hey, this is happening. And often the best way to do it is to just get in touch with these authorities and knock on their door with a letter which we can share with friends and family, that look, this is going on and you've got to do something about it. The best way to hold them accountable, as you said, is file an RTI, give them 30 days to respond. If they don't, go ahead, file an appeal. So I really appreciate, the way you kind of explained to us exactly who we go to and how we approach them, and keeping the various senior the departments in the loop. So I get a lot of questions from people about the NGT, how long cases in the NGT typically take. I know that you have filed multiple petitions in the NGT. Could you tell us a little bit about the process at the NGT and what it's like to take an environmental violation to the NGT?
You need to file a case under the relevant Environment Protection Act under with the NGT. It's called an application before the NGT, the original application before NGT. Now NGT has mandate only where the Environment Protection Act is concerned. If it's a forest, Indian Forest Act is kept out of the jurisdiction of NGT, and also the Wildlife Protection Act. So at times what happens, you file a case, it goes on and on, and after about say 3 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, whenever it's coming up, then your opponents bring up the fact that the NGT does not have jurisdiction on these issues. So you have to be very clear under which section of the law you are filing it with the NGT. And ideally, NGT was meant to be a very powerful body when it started off, but gradually it is being weakened. For example, here the Western bench of the NGT did not have a judge for almost 3 years, and it was shut. If you can shut down a court of law for 3 years, then that tells you all the story. Of late, there also has been a lot of what you call decisions from the NGT which have not been really up to the mark, or it doesn't do justice to the environmental cause, and that is something which we need to be concerned about. But the fact will always remain that the NGT is a technically equipped court to handle environment matters, and they're ideally supposed to dispense justice fast, and it is happening now. But again, what happens is, once you get an order from the NGT in your favor, then you find that the higher courts are staying it, and then that the entire purpose of NGT is defeated. It goes on for years on end. So you need to be very careful what you're filing and where you're filing it, and how to get relief for it.
We used to make this joke as law students that, in India, once you get the order, that's when the challenge really begins, because implementation is quite difficult, particularly of environmental orders, because, even though we have orders saying that you can't dump on mangroves, none of us are out in the mangroves at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. to prevent the dumping that may be taking place. So it is quite challenging to implement environmental orders. I totally understand and appreciate exactly what you're saying. Now, you're filled with so many success stories, Talon, and could you share a few of them, and could you share some of your experiences in protecting the environment, like orders that you managed to get, or lobbies that you managed to advocate for a couple of big decisions? Could you share some happy news and happy stories with us?
Happy stories, yes. Mercifully, God has been kind to me and He has given me less of bad news and more of good news. So, I would start off with the Ulhas River case, where the river was being polluted by four municipal corporations and industries. For the first time in the history of this country, the Supreme Court called up the Chief Secretary of the state and made him pay the fine. Actually, the NGT started this procedure where the NGT imposed a fine of 96 crores on the government for polluting a river. So, in the first time in history, the government paid money for polluting a river, and this order was challenged in the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ordered that the chief secretary must personally be present in the court, and they enhanced the fine in a hearing to 100 crores, and they said we want the money deposited, and the money got deposited. So that's a success story. There's another success story where a village in the Western Ghats was supposed to be submerged, apparently for irrigation purposes. But we unearthed the truth about it. It was actually being submerged to help mining on the other side of their village. So that the the Honorable High Court issued a stay order which is in force, and that river and the river is saved, the village is saved. We managed to save about all the wetlands in Maharashtra are protected because of our petitions. The term wetlands itself was absent in the Maharashtra record books. Now the Honorable High Court has ordered the wetlands which are seen in the atlas to be protected. The inventory of wetlands is being made, and a special committee has been set up. So that is another of some of our successes. Then we managed to save 3,000 trees on one single road of about 16 kilometers, which is the Shirsat Fata Ambadi road along the Gujarat highway and along the Bhiwandi Manor highway. So that road had about 3,000 trees, and MMRDA's idea of road widening was to just remove the trees from both sides, and most of these trees were neem trees, mango trees, and forest trees. So it would have been a real catastrophe if you had removed those trees. So we managed to get that stopped, and the project cancelled. So there are small stories, and of course, RA will always be remembered as one of a huge success story ever. It will go down in history as the longest uh, battle by an urban population, which we were proud to be part of. And we managed to hold on, bite on, don't let the government or the people who wanted to destroy it get away with it. And today, a city like Mumbai has a blessing of 800 acres of forests, and that's phenomenal. Nowhere in the world has this happened anywhere. It's a success story from which a lot of citizens can learn that if you have the will, if people come together, they can save nature, they can save biodiversity.
Stalin, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for all of your answers and all of your years
My
of
pleasure. My
experience.
pleasure.
I'm
Thank you
so
so much.
grateful.